to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio. We are pleased that Emily Rhorick, the South Regional Director for the Students for Liberty, has agreed to be our guest today. And that area encompasses the South and Deep South. It's very similar to the program we had just this past Monday, where we had the Young Americans for Liberty. She will update us on student attitudes and perceptions on liberty, as well as sharing, her personal thoughts on the matter. Emily, are you on the line? Oh, there she goes.
Yes.
There you go, Emily. We got you there. Thank you so much for being our guest today. We appreciate that so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, let me start by saying, how did you evolve? I'm sure a few years ago, your thoughts on liberty may not even have existed. I'm not sure, but you have to tell us. And then how did you go from wherever you were to where you are now?
Right. So I think originally I just didn't think about it much. I was very kind of apathetic to any type of political or ideology. I just didn't really care about it when I was in high school. Senior year of high school, I took a class called We the People, and it was a class that it was for a competition called the We the People competition, and you looked at how the Constitution has been applied throughout history. And so you had a lot of supplementary materials, like you looked at court cases and you looked at a lot of different things. And so that kind of made me realize more about what the Constitution was. And then when I got to high school, or when I got to college, I joined a libertarian group on my campus and went to a lot of Students for Liberty events where I learned sort of about more libertarian ideology. And I realized that for the first time, I actually agreed with what was being said, which never really happened with anything. Like, I'm from Myrtle Beach, so we always had the primaries in Myrtle Beach, and that was always, to me, ridiculous. I didn't like anyone that was there most of the time, and it was insane. So then I got involved with Students for Liberty, and I got involved last year as a campus coordinator, and then this year on the executive board, and I've been going to conferences and hearing from amazing speakers I know you had someone on here from Cato recently, great speakers.
I know them well, yeah.
Yeah, so great speakers from a lot of really good organizations that have kind of shaped my view on it.
Yeah. Well, this must be a real paradigm shift for you, because most students even don't get exposed to the Constitution. And when they do, we have a president now who's supposed to be a constitutional scholar, right? Because he taught, and he doesn't know the first thing about the U.S. Constitution. I even doubt that he even went to college. I doubt he even went to Harvard, because I actually know a person who's a very, very public person, I will not mention the person's name, who actually was in the same classroom with Barack Obama, but he never saw him there, which was very interesting. But yet he taught constitutional law, and yet he breaks every single rule, it seems, on the book. So it must be very confusing for students when we have a president that violates, all the presidents do. Bush did it, they've been doing it now for not only decades, probably for a century. They have been decimating the Constitution. And I think we've become, have we not become immune to it? Like, well, it's okay, we have a Constitution, but that doesn't really count. It's what the president wants to do that counts. Is that attitude pervasive, or is that just my cynical look at things for my age,
I think that it's definitely something that you see a lot, and you see people that are like, well, they're doing it, so it must be okay, or they're with the political party that I agree with, so it must be okay, even when they don't necessarily agree with what's being done. I think that sometimes people are a little bit too trusting of what's happening, and they think that because it's being done and because these people were elected, then that must mean that what they're doing is okay, and that causes all types of problems. But you do see a lot of people that are realizing and they're not agreeing with what's happening on campuses, even if they're not necessarily libertarian leaning, even if they're more Democratic or even more Republican, they don't like what they're seeing still, and they don't understand why their party is no longer representing them, or why their party is trying to take away their rights, which happens on both sides.
Yeah. What type of response or retort, I should say, do you receive when you approach people regarding the Students for Liberty and the classical liberal thinking of libertarianism? What's the typical retort or response that sort of tries to rebuff what you are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so I've been very surprised since I've been doing this that you actually do get a lot of positive responses. But some of the negative ones that I've heard are, from some sides, if you say that you want to let the market sort of regulate, or you want to let the market just work its course and work well, they'll say that the market fails, that you don't care about poor people, that you don't, that you're a horrible person, that you're selfish, or whatever else. And that'll be a really common retort on one side. And then I think I've also been called a hippie before by some more conservative people. Because, we'll have Students for Liberty has a drug war kit that sort of gives you more information about the drug war and the violence that it actually causes and the incarceration rates and everything else. So you'll have people when you're using that tabling kit that will be like, well, you're a hippie and you just like drugs. And it's this is actually a problem.
Right. Well, I've been called not only a hippie but a hippo. So I've been on both sides. What is your typical response when you are characterized as an uncaring person because you are a libertarian and the free market is the best way with which to raise the level of income for the average person? What's your response to that? How do you handle that?
Right. So there's two responses, and it definitely depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to someone that's more knowledgeable in economics, you could always sort of take an economic approach. But for general, when you're just talking to general public, people that don't necessarily take econ classes or they don't read economics, you can talk to them about the fact that, I believe in people. I love people. And I think that I think that people know what's best for them and that they can make the decisions for themselves. So taking away that ability for them to make the decisions for themselves, a lot of times I'll talk about, well, why would you give, it's like food stamps are government subsidies that can only go to a very specific thing. And people know what they need better than the government does. Because everyone is their own person, and right. I don't understand, I trust people to make decisions for themselves that will better themselves.
Yeah. How do you handle the situation with the military involvement that the United States has around the world, and we just can't help but just send troops. No matter what's happening, we'll send troops there, and it's always on some sort of altruistic mission, which has it's a cover for control for that area. How do students feel about that? Are they getting weary of war today?
I think definitely. We actually, various campuses with Students for Liberty that we have campus coordinators on, or we have volunteers on, have actually organized peace rallies just to sort of promote the idea of peace and everything else. And you get a lot of other groups to participate with you on that. It's almost universal. You can get, and so you might not agree on everything, but with a lot of other student groups and a lot of students, they agree that, peace is the way to go, that war really isn't something that you want to do. So those events have been very well attended on campus. They've gotten some media attention. And that was sort of a catapult from our new book, Peace, Love, and Liberty, which I think you have on the table, possibly.
That's right. Here it is. Yeah. Yes,
that's
absolutely.
What it looks like.
Yes, I am reading it, believe it or not. I'm almost finished with it. Excellent book. And do you give out that book? Do you give out that book to the students, or do they pay for it, or is it something that you give to them to read?
Yeah, so we give it out to them. We send our campus coordinators. All of them are equipped with boxes of these books.
Okay.
to pass out on their campuses, give to other groups that they work with. If students run out of the books that we give them, they can also go to our store and they could purchase for very cheaply a box of books to hand out. So we just give them out for free. This is part of a book program that we've been doing for a few years now. So we have, like last year's book was Why Liberty, the year before was After the Welfare State, a program that we've been working on with the Atlas Network.
Yeah. Now, do you have your own, when you have a meeting, who conducts the meeting, and do you have outside speakers typically? Do you have a Tom Palmer, for example? I know he's on the student board, but how is that, and how do you attract people to come to these meetings when students are running around, trying to study, maybe have a part-time job to have a few dollars in their pocket so they can live? How do you get the students together?
Yeah, so it depends on every campus. Some people, I know Dalton was talking about earlier this week about living sort of on a commuter campus and everyone goes home. I live on a campus that's in the central of downtown Charleston, so everyone kind of stays in the area. So it's a little easier to get people to come to meetings.
I see.
But at the same time, you have to sell them on the idea before you get there. So we do a lot of tabling where we give out. We do a lot of tabling where we give out things like Peace, Love, and Liberty, where we talk to people. We encourage them, if we have a speaker, to come out. Even if sometimes they don't necessarily agree with what we're saying, some students will come out just to kind of see the other side, or some of them will come out to try to argue. But a lot of times, people are very open-minded in a sense if they do come to the meeting. And it varies from group to group. But Students for Liberty, you can use a lot of student groups don't have a lot of money to bring out speakers. So they'll try to take from locals, or they'll pair up with another organization that's bringing in a speaker to bring a speaker to their campus. Students for Liberty also has a virtual speakers bureau where people can request someone like Jeffrey Tucker or Tom Palmer or a Cato scholar or someone from the Foundation for Economic Education, and they can request for them to do a Skype in, and they'll Skype in to the meeting, so it's a live event, and then students can actually ask them questions afterwards, so it's very interactive.
What is the number one concern of the students right now? When you have these meetings, what kind of questions are you asked, and in what arena do they center on? Oh, did you hear me?
I think,
okay.
Yeah, so I think a lot of students, it depends obviously where you are and what, I think a lot of students sort of see things locally. So where you are is very dependent. Like if you're in a state that is looking to legalize medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, obviously that's a very big topic in that state for those students because it's very local to them. But I think overall, people wanted to ask about, student debt and the cost of college and a lot of things that very much pertain to them, and sort of economics is actually a lot more popular than I thought it would be when I started doing this, because people look at the job opportunities and their outlook after they get out of college, and it doesn't look good.
Oh, they recognize it's not very good, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's obvious. In fact, the job growth in recently has been not in the 18 to 35, but in the 55 to 75-year-old people. The job growth is there. More of those people are working, and fewer people, younger people, are working. So it's actually the demographics are working against them and not for them, which is very unusual. The first time I think in our history that this has happened.
Right, and I think that everyone understands that it's a problem. They might not understand how extensive the problem is or how bad it is, and they probably don't know the statistic that you just said, but they do see that, they see their friends graduating and they see their friends not getting jobs and having to go back home, or they see their friends who can't get a job and then they go to get a master's degree or a PhD or something because they just can't get a job yet. So they're going to continue their education instead. So people understand that that's a problem. And I think some people will go to anyone that's willing to address it, even if you don't agree with, we've had people that come in because we're doing an economics topic sort of on the economy of jobs or something. And people will come in even if they don't agree with what we're saying because people don't talk about this a lot.
Right.
Everyone knows it's happening, but no one really discusses it.
Well, do they understand why the cost of college education is so high? Do they understand the reason why it's been exploding? For example, I went to a very good school in New York City. And when I went there, I knew if I graduated the school, there were many people in business. It was a business-oriented school, accounting school. And I knew that if I just graduated from this particular school, I wasn't a particularly good student, I'll be honest with you. But if I graduated, people would recognize that I graduated from a good school that had a solid foundation in accounting and finance and marketing, whatever, and that just by association, I would have a leg up on many other people. And I did find the job very easily because I went to that school. And a 4-year college, and it was very expensive at the time, was $4,000 total. So and the books weren't that expensive back then. So that was a minimal cost. Now, today that may seem just absolutely, like nothing. But they're paying not only a little bit more, but multiples of that, quadrumultiples of that, and they're not getting as good an education, and yet the jobs are not out there. I found a job immediately. I had a job before I even graduated. And do they know why we went from that stage to where we are today?
I think that they have an idea. If you try to tell them why, they'll get very, if you try to say that it has a lot to do with, government subsidizing higher education, they'll get very defensive about it because a lot of them are there on some type of scholarship and their response will be, well, I couldn't afford school otherwise. But it's not a very good response because they are the reason that college is increasing so much. Like you said, you had $4,000 for your entire school. I'm pretty sure I have in-state tuition and that wouldn't even covers maybe a semester, possibly.
Right.
Not even.
Yeah.
So, and that's just me going to a public in-state school.
Yeah, and even if you adjust it for inflation, we're still way off the chart. Now, I can understand if someone obtains a scholarship, but that should be limited to a very, very select group of people and shouldn't be influencing the cost of school that significantly. So it's really not the scholarship, it's the student loans that are being given freely to them. Do they understand that the reason for the cost of education is because student loans are given away so freely by the federal government, and then as a result, the colleges are charging more because the students have free money. Let's charge them for it, and it'll continue to go up until the entire system collapses. Do they have any concept of that at all?
I don't think so, and I think it just it's one of those things that people are they're very happy getting the loans because otherwise, people, if you're my age, you don't really, or I know my dad went to college, but the cost was a lot cheaper then, but it still wasn't as cheap as you were saying, but it was pretty cheap. But he went to an in-state school too. And my parents were very clear on the fact that, college is very expensive very early on. So it's work very hard, get scholarships, so you don't have to take out loans. But if you don't get the scholarships, you do have to take out those loans, and everyone's telling you high schools now don't really offer an option. They have college fairs instead of, I guess they used to have job fairs. A lot of them don't even have job fairs anymore because it's this mindset that every single person needs to go to college. You have meetings with your guidance counselor to discuss what colleges you're going to, and I don't know anyone that's ever gone, at least from my school, that went to a guidance counselor and said, well, I'm not going to college. Because that's just not what they're preaching anymore. They want you to they make the SATs so important because, you need to get into college to have a good career, and then you go to college and you don't really have options when you get out either.
Right, yeah. But by the way, when I said I paid $4,000, that was a private college, by the way. If I went to a state college, it would have been maybe $2,500 for 4 years. So, you can imagine a private college today, you'll be working for the rest of your life. You'll never pay off the loan. I don't like schools. I don't like schools because most professors and most teachers, although their intentions are honorable, are unqualified to teach. I know this sounds kind of lofty, what I'm saying, and maybe a little bit headstrong, but because I know I have people in my family that are teachers, and they ain't the sharpest pencil in the drawer, but neither do they have a good sense of logic and understanding of what is going on. They are either preaching something which doesn't exist or an ideology that is absolutely corrupt. I mean, logically corrupt, and so. They pass this on to the students. Now, some of the feedback that I received from Dalton a few days ago was that, well, when he has a very difficult time discussing any subjects, political subjects, if you will, or economic subjects, especially economics, with the teachers because they get angry because they inject their political philosophy. And they don't want to talk whether or not it's right or wrong. It's their political philosophy, and they're passing that on to the students. Don't the students today see that people are not getting jobs? They're not getting an education that they can use. I mean, in the workplace, they have no skills. They're just graduating and having a $75,000 loan that they have to pay off. But, of course, they can't because they don't have a job. Hasn't anyone woken up to that, including the staff? Don't the colleges themselves preach what I just said?
Not really. I mean, it depends on where you go, obviously. I'm very lucky that I'm an economics major, and my economics department here is very free market based. So I'm extremely lucky on that front. We get to talk about all of this stuff. But so in other schools, though, if you have, a professor that's sort of preaching Keynesian economics, then you'll walk out of that class thinking that the solution to your problems is more government spending. So You'll think that they're offering you a solution, but the government's just not doing what needs to be done for you to end up to help the job market or to increase employment. You'll have all of the curves that tell you that you can increase employment by increasing government spending, or you can do this. So they think that they'll walk out thinking that they have a solution and that the government's just not implementing their solution. And then they'll go on to assumedly advocate for more government spending if they walk away believing what they're told on campus.
Yeah. What is the general attitude of the student regarding the current administration and its policies?
I think it varies. I know a lot of people that I've talked to, even people that I knew that supported Obama when he was in office, or supported Obama like for re-election and a lot of stuff. Even they have been unhappy with what's going on, such as, drone strikes. That was really a big thing that really had people thinking this is a problem.
Right.
Like even if I had friends that, had all the stickers on their cars and everything else, and they were very upset with sort of the way that was going. So I think people are slowly beginning to realize, some people have started, comparing him. Some friends that I have that are Democrats have started, comparing him to Bush even. So they're just kind of, I'm hopeful that people will sort of start seeing that everyone's almost the same. It doesn't really matter, party lines. Yeah. They're essentially about the same. They're going to do the same thing. It's just how they do it or how they justify it that's different.
What tactics are you using to change the mindset of the typical student who thinks that what our government does is generally good, and it's just is not working because of this lousy capitalist free market system that we have that enriches only a few people and subjugates the entire rest of the 99% of the population, which is obviously a misnomer. How do you approach that? Is that a subject of conversation that comes up often?
Yeah, I think it is. It depends on where you go. Personally, I've had a lot of experience talking to people about this, and they've said that, only the wealthy get wealthier and the poor don't get anything. And you can kind of talk to them about how capitalism is essentially the only economic system that advocates and lets entrepreneurs thrive, and it allows for innovation. And it's the reason, you have this phone in your hand, and it's the reason that you have your computer that you're doing all your work on, and the reason you don't have to go to the library to do your research papers anymore. And without sort of the capitalist system, you lose the incentive to innovate anymore. And you can see that in places like, if you look historically in like Soviet Russia, or back when it was the Soviet Union, and you see sort of what they were, how far off their innovations were in terms of like farming or anything else. And it's really, I think it's eye-opening. Some people will make other excuses for why that happened here and not in other places. But there are some people who will at least think about it. And I think one of the main things that we're trying to do, we're not going to change someone's opinion in a 5-minute conversation out on campus tabling, and we're probably not going to change their worldview in an hour-long meeting. But we hope that if we're out there enough, if people talk to us enough, if we go out there and we talk about enough different topics, people will sort of start sitting in and realizing that, oh, I agree with this and I agree with this, and they had a meeting last week that I also agree with. And it's very slow. It's a slow process, but I know personally in our group, we had a girl who this past year had seen us tabling before. She'd gone to a couple of our meetings, and she finally came up and she left she was a college Republican member, and she left the college Republicans and said no, because I actually agree with you guys.
Touche!
Yeah, so it took
great.
about a year, but we were active enough. And I think that's one of the big things that Students for Liberty does, is it gives you the resources to be active on your campus, because you do need to have that contact. I think there's some rule that's like someone needs to hear something 3 times before they remember it.
Right.
And you need to make sure that they remember what you're saying.
Do you ever try to qualify when people say capitalism? I mean, capitalism is a strange word. We use it to define everything in the financial / political arena. And all capital is putting money into something, capital, to create something so something can be produced. And we use capitalism as being bad. I mean, how could it be bad when you're putting money into making something? But do we ever try to qualify that by saying there's a difference between free market capitalism, which is really the freedom of association of people to put their money wherever they want in order to produce something for not only their good, but for the good of society, versus crony capitalism, which means that you go to Washington, you lobby for something, you get a big government contract, usually for something very destructive that costs society, reduces the standard of living of everyone, and makes the world miserable, but makes a few people very, very rich. And that's the system that we have now. Have we ever used that approach, and what kind of response do you get from that?
Right. So we have students have done through, Young Americans for Liberty, which Dalton was a part of, through Students for Liberty, through just economics groups that they have on campus, people will go out and they'll do crony capitalism events to sort of point out what crony capitalism is, and sort of the hope of getting people to realize the difference between capitalism and crony capitalism. Because you can say free markets all you want, but the average student that you're going to talk to probably has no idea what you're talking about,
right?
Or they don't care enough to ask you, and they'll just shake their head and walk away and never think about it again.
Right.
If you say capitalism, some people will try to start fighting with you, or they'll agree with you. And if you do crony capitalism, there are very few people. I think I've met 2 people in my time as like a student activist who have tried to advocate in favor of crony capitalism. But for the most part, everyone's really against crony capitalism, and they think that this is a bad idea. So it's a matter of trying to make them let them have a distinguishing factor between crony capitalism and actual, good capitalism, which is what we mean when we say capitalism. And when you say I'm a capitalist, generally you mean free market. You don't mean that you're for all the lobbying that happens.
Yeah. Well, Emily, we're going to stop. Whoops, we lost her. We're okay. Okay. We haven't lost you, have we, Emily? You're still there? Okay.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, see, I have to. That's why. See, that's when you pay someone less than minimum wage. This is what you get on a keyboard. But we're going to stop for just a 1-minute break. Can you just hold on, and we'll come back.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I want to get your impression of what. How people define our form of government today. Okay, give that some thought, and we're going to be right back. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Well, we're back. This is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and we are pleased to have with us today Emily Rhorick, and she's with the Students for Liberty. She represents the Southeast and Deep South region, and she's a director there. She's at the College of Charleston in South Carolina, and we are discussing what student attitudes are. All right, Emily, are you still there? You're still there. You haven't run away from us. Okay, that's great. Emily, do the students have an appreciation for the fact that we don't have a representative democracy, if you want to call it that, being a republic, that we have really an oligarchy running everything? And they're absolutely correct when they say very few have a tremendous amount, but they all happens to reside, just by coincidence, all happen to reside in Washington, D.C. Do they have any concept of that, and how do you address that?
I think a lot of students are, very, even the ones that are very politically active and that, have their party, a lot of them don't like Washington, D.C., or they don't like Congress, or they don't like the way that the government works, and they'll say that they don't like it because it's not in their favor. But even when the majority is in their favor, they'll still be unhappy with what's going on. And I think people are realizing things. I know students respond very well to satire. So when it was speculated that, Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton would run, people started doing satire things that were like, well, so essentially the only presidents have to be in the same family or something like that.
Right.
Making jokes about it, because I think that type of advertising really gets to students, and people think it's funny, and they'll share it and they believe in it, and yet, they might not be willing to do anything about it, which is the sad part, and it's sort of the part of student activists trying to change that.
Now, when you have these meetings, about how many students typically show up for a particular meeting, and what is the typical format of the meeting?
Right. So it varies between every campus and every school, and depending on what type of group you have. Personally, on my campus, we have generally a speaker, and we have about anywhere from 20 to 40 students, depending on the meeting topic. And sometimes we'll have a speaker with a question and answer point afterwards. Sometimes we'll have, generally with smaller meetings, we'll have discussion based where people just kind of express their opinions and talk about it. Sometimes we'll have a moderator who's sort of an expert on the subject and sort of able to interject on a few things and just let students have their voices heard and try to create a safe environment where they feel comfortable sharing it, because a lot of times I think this sort of Socratic method of discussion helps people realize what they actually believe. I can't tell you how many times we've been talking about someone, and then halfway through someone expressing their opinions on something, they'll just completely stop because they don't know where their opinion goes next, or they never thought about it this far.
Right.
And they only thought about it on a surface level. And that that can change people's opinions very quickly, too.
That's almost an aha moment for them, right? That's terrific.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have disagreements or arguments or even fights breaking out? See, I'm from Harlem. If we had a meeting like that, there'd be a gunfight. But so Harlem, New York, that is, East Side. I sang doo-wop back in the 50s, by the way. That's how far back I go. And but do you have any verbal disagreements that get kind of a little bit out of hand ever, or is it usually very peaceful?
I think we have a lot of disagreements. Generally, they don't get too heated, and a lot of times people will walk away, let's agree to disagree on this part. But it depends when it gets very personal, when someone brings up something, if you have family who are police officers, or if you have family in the military and you're advocating against the military or something, and it just, or you have someone that comes in and they have family associated with something, or they have family in the government or something like that, when it gets personal is when, or when someone takes it personally is when you have sort of the big disagreement. For the most part, everything's been very civil, no actual fights breaking out.
Oh, how disappointing, geez, I'm just...
Yeah, you'll have people who just don't agree with what's being said, or they feel like they're being ambushed if they're the only one that believes what they believe while they're there. And so sometimes you'll have those people leave the meeting. I think it's important to, still reach out to those people and sort of, especially if they took it personally, to just kind of explain where you're coming from or where the other person was coming from, or just, invite them back to something else. They don't always take you up on that, or the chance to talk, but it's worth it to try. Because no one goes in meaning something personal. When we talk at these meetings, they're very broad strokes, what's happening, what could happen if we don't do something different, what could happen if we do something different. They're kind of, let's just talk about what's going on instead of letting it happen without understanding what's going on.
Okay, Emily, I'm going to ask you to move a little bit more to your left, okay, because I think you're going off the screen. Could you put it back on again, please? Split screen it. Okay, a little bit more to your left. There you go. Okay, yeah, we were losing you. Okay, now what is the hottest subject that typically is approached during these meetings, and what subjects do they want to talk about more so than others?
So I know a lot of really popular subjects that have been happening, across Students for Liberty's network. You have, drug war events. You have peace events. Also, events sort of on entrepreneurship have been very popular because you have people that realize that, like we were talking about before, there's no real job market. So you have people that are deciding that maybe they should create one for themselves. So also meetings, one of my personal favorite meetings and ones that we get a lot of people at are the ones of, creative destruction. Talking about things like ride-sharing apps like Uber or Lyft and stuff like that. People are really, if you incorporate technology somehow, people are very excited about it.
Do people understand the concept that, all this licensure by the cities and whatever it's really just crony capitalism, making a few people rich and not allowing ease of entry? Do they understand that, or do they think we need this for some sort of control or to avoid civil chaos in civilian life?
Yeah, so students are very, in my experience, I have yet to meet a student who hated Uber or Lyft. Students are very pro this type of, ride-sharing app. They're a lot of times cheaper than taxis. They're safer. They're more reliable. You can call a taxi cab sometimes and have scheduled for it to be there in 30 minutes, and then an hour later they still never showed up, and the company has no idea where the driver that they sent you is. So it's a lot more, people are very pro this, and then you see people getting very angry about the fact that, cities are trying to take it away. I know like Charleston, there was a big thing where Uber just came to Charleston. It's less than a year old here. And when they were trying to take it away, people got very upset about it. And I think it's little things like that. So people don't understand that this is a lot of times they don't understand that this is crony capitalism. They don't understand that this is, at work. They don't understand that the invention of Uber and Lyft is innovation. It's creative destruction. It's the benefits of having a market. They don't realize all of that underlying thing, but they do agree that they should be able to do this if they want to. And it's those tiny steps, I think, that are very important. It's people that realize that, government regulated taxi cabs don't work. And it's, those small steps that people are taking that hopefully as more innovation comes along and the government tries to suppress it, people will realize what's actually going on.
Yeah. Well, do they have the mindset that if you want to do anything, you first must have permission from the government, and you don't have this freedom of association, the freedom to develop a business or invent a product or whatever, but you need permission from the government, or else we really can't do it because it may be harmful to society. Is that pervasive, or do they realize that's a crock?
I think a lot of people that go into the idea of, I want to create a business, they don't necessarily realize how bad it is. I assume that once they start to try, they will realize very quickly how much permission they actually need. But while you're in school, I think people are in a very idealistic mindset. So the people that
else, and someone would say, hey, Joe's such a jerk, and he's making money doing this, we can actually provide the same product or service at a more reasonable price, better service, and love our customers, and we'll take every customer from them and we'll get rich. That's the way it works.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that a lot of times. But then you have those things like Uber and Lyft where people see that. They see, the better service, and they see the better quality, and they see its cheaper prices. And then they see the government trying to shut it down so then all of a sudden the government is that person that's taking advantage of them.
Absolutely,
and it's just sort of bringing it more. I think a problem before was that a lot of the things that, the government controlled were they didn't apply to students as much. It wasn't in their mindset. But then when you start messing with technology, I know a lot of people who are very big on the net neutrality thing from all sides, who see that. Yeah. Yeah. So you have a lot of people that are actually, a lot of students, no matter what side they're on, that are very knowledgeable about that because it's interfering directly with something that is important to them and something that they use every day and something that impacts their life. So it's just a matter of it has to be personal almost.
Well, when I was young, 120 years ago, a medallion for a taxi cab, to be a taxi cab to own a taxi cab in New York City was a hellacious $25,000. And I thought, how could anyone ever make a living if they have to pay $25,000 for a medallion? And I just heard a few months ago that cost now is $1 million for a medallion. Now, And yet, all a person has to do, in a free market, in a true country that is free, you advertise saying if you want to go somewhere, put a sign on your car and say, I'm a taxi, I'll take you anywhere you want to go, and you do it. There should be no licensure. Everyone takes a risk when they get into a taxi cab. You can have a medallion for $1 million and still be a maniac, but that's the risk that you take in the marketplace. But obviously, if someone is going to do that, and all they have to do is do something wrong one time and they're out of business, so they're not going to do very well. And yet I can never understand why a medallion was needed in the first place, because you can have a maniac buying a medallion just as well as you have a maniac who doesn't have a medallion. And yet, again, that's crony capitalism. That's where the 1% or the 0.5% make all the money and everyone else is working to support the crony capitalists. And that has nothing to do with free market. It has nothing to do with libertarianism. It has everything to do with control. And I'm sorry for the diatribe, but it drives me nuts.
No, it definitely makes sense. And then it almost warps the people that are involved in those industries because they paid so much for it that now they want to be protected because they had to pay so much for it. And I understand why they want to be protected, because that is a ridiculous price. You'll notice a lot of places, the people that are like Uber or Lyft drivers that you'll meet, if you start talking to them, a lot of them are former cab drivers that jumped ship as soon as they could. Yeah. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it's no different than in a communist nation where you need permission from the state in order to conduct business, and you have to pay the state bureaucrats or Politburo or whatever you want to call it in order to be in business. And I don't think there's anything in the Constitution that says that. There's a freedom of association. You can do whatever you want, provided you not infringe upon the equal rights of others. Period. I mean, that's the whole concept of our Constitution and our country. Do the students see that the country is going downhill fast? That the probability of us recovering is about nil because of the tremendous debt, the hundreds of trillions of dollars of long-term debt that we have taken on, and that the students now, today, are responsible for that debt, and they're paying for my Social Security and the Social Security of my wife, and they're going to have to pay for that for the rest of their lives, and tough on them?
I think that people... it's in the back of their minds, but they don't discuss it. It's not discussed a lot, and they don't think about it a lot because of that. On our campus, we had an event where we were given a banner from Young Americans for Liberty, and we threw an event that it took the national budget and it divided it per citizen of the United States, and that is a very large number still.
It's phenomenal.
So if everyone were to collect on their debts, how much would each individual have to pay of the United States? And we just set the banner outside, and it got people to stop and really look at it. The problem is that, and we tried to discuss with them, what solutions to this would be or something else, and people just don't have an answer, and they don't know what to do about it, and they're expecting a lot of times the government to fix it for them. But, when they're the reason that we're in the problem. I had an econ class here where our professor just sat us down. He's like, this is a problem. It's your problem. What are you going to do to fix it? And no one had an answer for it. It's a looming problem over everyone. It's either going to hit us or it's going to hit like our children or the next generation. It's going to hit somebody, and it's going to hit them very hard. And we don't want to think about it because it's too complicated. Well, we think that other people will take care of it.
Well, back, I hate to say this, back in the old days, but it really was. It was so different. The mentality of a person, even a student, back in the old good old days, as they say, you worked, you produced, you avoided debt like the plague, and you saved. Now, does that sound like what we're doing today?
No, I think in a lot of ways, you're encouraged to take on debt. You're encouraged, to take out money for your school. If you're going to something like med school, you're going to take out even more. You're encouraged to, buy a car and take out a loan on the car. And eventually, they want you to buy a house and take out a mortgage on the house you're going to take years to pay back. It's not avoiding debt anymore. It's essentially every person is going to walk around with a cloud of debt over their head that they might not even pay off by the time they're retired.
That's correct. I mean, they don't see the fact that 50 years ago, a person could graduate high school, get a medium job, a modestly paid job, have a small house, 2 children. The mom stayed home because there's a division of division of labor. Someone's got to take care of the house while someone's out working. You can't have both doing the same thing at the same time. If you're going to have kids, that is, it doesn't work very well. I know people say it does, it doesn't. And they had a car, which was paid for, and they were actually saving money to send their kids to college, all on one modest income. And today, that person would be on food stamps. And they don't see this transition. They don't see that, and this can't go back. Now, for example, take my situation. My wife just is starting Social Security for the first time this month. So she's getting her first check this month. In fact, next week. Can't wait, I have Social Security. I work for a large multinational corporation, and I have a very, very small pension from them. But, it's something. I mean, it's a few $100 a month. And when you add that up, and plus being 72, I'm still working full-time. I own 2 businesses. And I have my own radio station, which this is my hobby more than anything else. So my income actually is much, much higher than the average income of a working family today. So I'm actually making money. I mean, I'm doing financially better today than I ever have been, working less, but I'm collecting from all the years that I have worked. And now these college students have to work to support me. And I want them to suffer because I want to make a lot of money, you see my point. And but they will never be in that position because they will never make it to my age financially because the debt is so high. Do they see a financial Armageddon coming, or do they think that this thing can go on forever and somehow the government's going to save them?
I worry a lot of times that a lot of people think that they're going to get saved. But like what you were saying before, people look at recent history and they see, that people had one working person in the family, they had a house, they had a car, and people were very bad about recent history or teaching recent history or talking about recent history.
Yeah.
So people don't realize that, you were able to do that without debt. It's not something that they just go ahead and they assume that debt is just a part of life that you're going to have to deal with and that is going to follow you and you're always going to have it. And it's almost a compliancy and saying that this is normal because for people my age, it is. Like I know my parents, the whole time I was growing up, they had debt for cars or for a house and everything. So it's what we're used to. And that's a really hard mindset to get people out of.
Right. Here I am, 72 years old, and guess what I do? I work, and I'm still saving money. I'm still putting money away every month. I'm still doing this. When am I going to spend the money? I don't know. I'm too busy to spend the money. But yet, the people who are spending the money are the people who don't have it, which I think is just absolutely incredible. I would not want to be a young person today in this economy because it's a losing proposition. Do they realize what could happen if the U.S. defaults? Do they have any concept of this, the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency, losing the status as a world's reserve currency, and having an economic implosion of the dollar? I mean, do they have any concept of what could really happen to them?
No. I mean, recently when there was that whole issue about whether or not we should raise the debt ceiling or that we weren't going to raise the debt ceiling so we were going to be late on our loans or like all of this stuff was going to happen, a lot of people around campus, you try to talk to them about that and they don't know what's going on. They're not even aware that was an issue at the time. They're very unaware about a lot of times, and there are exceptions of people that are very interested in this and that really care about this, but for the most part, if you just go up to a random college student, they're not really going to understand what you're talking about because they don't care about it. And so the trick is, how do you make them care about it? How do you make them realize that this is actually something that they really need to care about?
Right. That
the national debt is something that will affect them eventually, whether they realize it now or not.
I have 2 questions before our hour is almost up. This thing flew by. Emily, what is the typical attitude toward the minimum wage?
I think on campus, it is that typically the attitude is that it is too low and that you need to raise it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's their logic?
That it should be a living wage, and that it's not a living wage.
All right. So
and their logic is they want to help people.
All right. So if a person goes to school, and let's say it's an inner city kid, and let's assume it's a minority kid. It makes no difference if it's a minority kid, but I'll throw that in just for the heck of it, right? And let's assume
your sort of skill level, but you could build the skills to work up.
That's right. I would hire, if someone came to my business and said, and let's assume a minority kid that can't get a job and said, Mr. Cristiano, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to work for you for 3 weeks. don't pay me a dime. After 3 weeks, if you don't hire me, it'll be the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life, business mistake you've ever made in your life. Would I hire that kid?
Yeah.
Sure I would, yeah. Now, what would it would cost me a lot of money. Why? Because I would have to train that kid. That kid would be going to school and not paying a dime. And do these kids know that the cost of high school education today is more expensive than going to private school? Well, not high school, but high school and elementary school is actually more expensive via the government route, the public school system, than it is in the private school system. And yet, the results are abysmal. And they're coming in. They don't realize that, do they?
People don't realize it because to them, it doesn't cost anything.
All right.
And to them, it's something that, they have to do.
Yeah.
So you have students, and then you also have, the stigmas against once you get to college against, private school kids or homeschooled kids, which aren't, a lot of times they're not accurate, but they still stick there. And so it's just a very strange system where people don't, a lot of things you just anymore, especially sort of people my age, you take for granted the fact that the public school system is there, that you're going to school to you free. So if someone says something about cutting money from schools, you're like, well, your reaction might be, well, my school was really bad. If you cut it, it's going to be worse.
Worse, right.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
but most of the money goes to the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy, again, is part of that crony capitalism that they hate so much, but yet they did continue to support it. Drives me nuts. I play this record in my head all day. Now, do they realize that if they didn't have, if the government didn't subsidize the schools the way it does, and that there was no minimum wage, and they got out of school, that maybe there would be, and there was a family structure, don't they realize that, and there was no welfare, that when they graduated, they will starve to death if they don't acquire a skill or a trade or some knowledge.
I think people think that now, whether it's true or not. People are of the mindset that they need that job, they need to get it. I think people now are a little bit, they're not as some people think that they get out of college and they think they're too good for a job. And I think that's the main difference, is that you now have expectations for what a job with a college degree should be able to get you.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing now that I've been seeing, but people don't think about it.
It seems like the college today is the high school of yesteryear, and it's so. And I know people who have masters in business administration, and they're not the sharpest pencil in the drawer. And I say, fine, what are you going to do with that? And total blank stare. And they got a master's in business administration. I said, are you going into business? And they go, no. I said, well, what'd you get it for? Well, it was available, so I took it. Well, what are you doing with it? I don't know. I can't imagine having a master's in business administration and have no concept of what business is. Anyway, Emily, the red lights are going on saying, Joe, shut up because you're running out of time. Emily, I'd like to give you the next 60 seconds is all yours, so you can tell our listeners something about your organization and how they can reach you.
Right. So Students for Liberty is an international nonprofit organization that focuses on students and educating them on the ideas of liberty, helping student groups educate their campus on liberty, and providing a real support network for them and we have a lot of resources for student groups and a lot of conferences that you can go to learn more. For more information, just go to studentsforliberty.org, and you can find all of our resources, as well as pretty soon we're going to be releasing our 2015 regional conferences, which are going to take place between October and November this year.
All right, great. If I'm ever in the neighborhood, I would love to be invited to speak to those students. I would have a lot of fun with them. I want to thank you very much for being on our program. You have been an absolute delightful guest and very informative, and I really appreciate you taking your time to be on this program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much, and bye-bye. Bye. This is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife says, you're either striving to protect your freedom or you're allowing it to go away. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano, Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.